Hello, peeps. You're here right away. Welcome, welcome. Just waiting on Neil to log in still tonight, and then we'll get to talking about some Jericho cards. So, um, yeah, yeah. If you're here, be sure to say hello, chat with us. We love talking to you. Neil will be here shortly, I'm sure. Um, so I'm just kind of just hanging out right now. We're a few minutes early, but I just wanted to get the stream going. So I hope everybody had a good Thursday. Um, just excited to dive into this. We've got the last of the cards, which is super awesome. I think there's some real bombs in this set, and I think there's a lot of obviously unexplored possibilities. So if you missed last night's stream, we had a special guest on. Nick Connolly, lead developer for Plaid Hat, joined us and did some commentary for my match against Problem for our tournament, TTS tournament that's going on. And I think it was really a good match. I think at the end of the day, bad matchup for my deck in particular, but a good match. And so if you're kind of interested in seeing that all play out, um, it'll be available on demand through this channel here, so you can just go check out our content vids. Yeah, I am too, Carl. Good luck with your match here in 30 minutes. I think that I think it'll be really curious to see how the competition sort of shapes up as we move forward. I think there were some surprise losses in round one, and I think there's some not so surprise losses, and I think there was a lot of really close games, and even my game was no exception to that. So I'll be curious to see how a competitive tournament with fixed deck lists changes things. I'm currently working on card analysis, so it's taking me a little longer than I'd like. Unfortunately, my son's classroom at daycare was shut down due to a COVID case. So that just means I'm now a stay-at-home dad for the next 2 weeks, which basically limits a ton of my available time to get things done. So I'm just really focused on trying to get as many games up on our YouTube channel as possible, and from the tournament, as well as finish up this Ash Techie tournament. I got to get Brian and I's game up from the Ash Techie tournament, and that'll wrap that up. Yeah, I did see a path to victory. Um, it it involved getting second Shadowhound book online, which is why I spent so much time playing Ancestor Spirits just to keep digging for Hound books. Because I think if I can play 2 Hounds a turn and then use the Hounds aggressively, I close his board position out and lock out his ability to play units around my Hounds. And the Shadow Guard was like a last ditch effort in that game, and really was just like, if I'm going to trade damage with Cole, then I'm going to trade some damage with Cole, and hopefully the deck plays into its own in the late game. And that never really worked out for me, unfortunately. I also think that I don't know if you spend any time listening to the post-game commentary, but my first 5, I made the choice in this matchup to first 5 a Particle Shield and a Sword of Virtue. And normally where the Particle Shield would be, I put in either a Summon Salamander Monk or the Ancestor Spirit. And so I think if I'd have just played Salamander Monk that game, I would have probably saved anywhere from 2 to 4 slash damage. And I think in that scenario, like the way the rest of the game played out, I mean, it's obviously very difficult to know when you have salamander monks on the field, but I think I can use the salamander monks to trade crickets, and that leaves my hound open to get attacks in through particle shield protections. And because I have 3 particle shields and my opponent had abundance and I knew he had abundance, I should have just let that happen because I was going to draw the particle shields anyways. So I still like the round 1 sword choice, especially with Ceratosaurus mount, because I can just get the Ceratosaurus mount after he's invested a bunch of time and dice into it. So yeah, I think that's really exactly where I made the mistake. So, I was just really concerned about like getting 100 blazed in round 1, and he did 100 blaze me in round 1, but he just 100 blazed an ancestor spirit instead, which was like, I'm just going to live with this. And ultimately what it ended up happening is the way the dice spread works when you have to do that. Like my choices were, because he abundance and I got an ancestor spirit off the abundance, and so I like played the ancestor spirit and just went on that plan instead, which meant I couldn't play the particle shield anyway. So like that just confirmed to me that I made the wrong choice almost instantly. I didn't think I was going to lose because of that choice, but I think at the end of the day, it would have made the game drastically different, and I think it's possible that I could have pulled that win out. It would have been difficult. And again, to Nick and Neil's point, that last draw was a 50-50 for the Molten Gold, right? Like, I wasn't going to have a ton of time because he was going to have to main action in abundance there, and that meant I was going to have to make a Shadowhound immediately, and then swing Shadowhound, and I didn't have any other surprises, right? So, like, the deck sort of has this potential lack of reach in the end game, and traditionally it doesn't matter in most matchups, but in Cole it does, because I think just making a unit that he has to spend 2 slashes on is more valuable than making a 2/1 that he spends a single slash on. And I'm not sure that puts him down more cards, but it certainly puts a lot more pressure on Cole's slash to have the monk instead. So, I mean, yeah, at end of the day, that's what the monk is in the deck for, and I altered my plan going in, like when I was looking at the deck list, because he just had 6 sweepers, and so I was like, I'm just not going to get a stick-up Shadowhound if he has 6 sweepers. But like in hindsight, if he's going to sweep me aggressively, like, and he never did, right? Like he never did that whole game. So like he also was very good at not opening up the Hound to get value out of the Hound ping. There was very few opportunities where I felt like that was the right play when I was looking at my hand and it was holding 2 Sword of Virtues and 2 Shadow Guards and 2 Particle Shields at one point, and you're just going, I don't really need to use Hound for any one part of this. And in round 3 in particular, he did a couple of different things that I would have changed. So I don't know. I mean, I think end of the day, like, I don't feel bad about how the match turned out. I just I just feel like there's some different lines of play I could have made that potentially would have changed the outcome of that game. Yeah. It did put me in some bad value plays, for sure. Like, I mean, one of the worst value plays I can make is playing Hound for no value on the focus effect, and just getting the Hound like swept, right? Like 100 blazing the Hound, or Mist Typhooning the Hound. Like those are the kinds of things. I don't feel as bad about it if I can then get value out of the Hound itself, like if I can attack. But if he's got that in hand, and with 6 of them in the deck, it's gonna happen. I basically just knew that every round there was gonna be at least 1 sweeper in hand. So obviously that's why I play the Particle Shields, is for that exact scenario. But I just ultimately had to like pivot into Shadow Guard, and pivoting into Shadow Guard meant that my opponent had to make some very specific play patterns to make Shadow Guards work, and he did it for me twice. But ultimately we were trading 3 for 3 because one was a cricket, right, with a divine power, and the other was the Ceratosaurus. But I set the Ceratosaurus up to do that. Like that was the play line in order for me to try to at least. I knew the Ceratosaurus was a safe bet for that play line. So it, is what it is. Like when you look at it, and I go back and I watched the video last night and yet again today. It may be better just not to let him ever have the Ceratosaurus, but I also never get to make a Shadow Guard in that scenario either. And so then I'm really down to like only Shadowhounds and Particle Shield protecting Shadowhounds. And maybe that's enough, but he never gave me targets to 2-for-1 him either. So it was a tough game. I mean, you got to give mad respect to him. Like he played it exactly the way he had to play it to neutralize the Hound as much as possible. And the Hound was more or less ineffective in that whole game. I don't think that's the norm with Hound, though. I just don't. I think that's a norm with Hound against Cole, potentially. And some Cole decks still are going to try to play a lot of battlefield units and use Slash as just a removal helper. And I think that, when you get on that sort of plan, Hound just does a lot of work. One of the things I could have done easily is held Odette's ability for something else and then just played like Hound into Raptor Herder and Hatchling, right? And again, then just use the Shadow Guards as defense units throughout the whole game to protect my life total. It's just tough. It's a tough matchup no matter what when you've got... Well, and for him, he actually has 3 copies of Shared Sorrow, too. So really, Shared Sorrow is like copies 7, 8, and 9 of Sweepers. So, like it's just, that deck was really purpose-driven in taking care of wide board states. And not that my deck necessarily goes really wide, but it doesn't have big toughness bodies. All right. Let's pull up the preview. I think Neil is here now.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
I was just listening to you talk about your
match. I still think the line that I think I had a line to win that game, but it was hard to win that game without second Hound book. That's really what it boiled down to. Is I just needed to start being able to cast Hounds 2 times a turn and forego particle shields. That was just kind of where it was at. Like if he takes a whole turn to particle shield me or 100 blades me, and I can save even if I save a Hound on 1 particle shield there, like okay, and if not, then I just play another Hound for value after he thinks the board is clear of Hounds. Thinking that I may not spend those dices or money. And I think that's where I get to it, but I also just felt a lot of pressure after round 2. Like round 2, like I hadn't touched him yet, right? He'd already done 6 damage to me. I just felt like I was just losing on Cole plan over and over and over again. And
yeah, I mean,
I started to feel
like you said in your little thing, and Carl confirmed in chat, not having the monk was really bad.
Yeah, it just was the worst decision I could have made. And I should have...
You put yourself in a position where it's very difficult to win from the beginning.
Right, yeah.
And it's probably very difficult to win anyway, even with the monk, but like without the monk, it's way worse.
Yeah, I think it's almost impossible to win without monk, and I think you have a shot at winning. Your opponent has to play you perfectly, and you have to play perfectly to have a shot at winning against Cole with my deck. And there's one Cole in the whole tournament, and I said this yesterday also on stream, like I was hoping to dodge the Cole. Like I looked at when we got all the deck lists, I went, I just hope I dodge the Cole. Like it's one of 22 decks. So I had like a 1 in 22 chance of being paired with Problem, and I got paired with Problem. So it is what it is. I mean, there are plenty of other decks that can beat my deck, no doubt about it. But I think those decks are going to have to work to do it. There are sweepers throughout this whole tournament. But really, the only sweepers I'm really worried about are meteors, because I really can't interact with a meteor at all.
Which is the most common one, I think.
It is. I haven't finished up the the total sequencing. But most of those decks that are playing Meteor are also playing units, right? So I still think I can get some value out of, like they're playing they're playing
can't be
PBs,
as bad as playing against Cole.
right? They're playing against PBs that are gonna just like, they're gonna have to like they're using Meteor as their own like sort of self board clear, right? And so I think that I can use the Hound still to advantage in those scenarios to reduce damage taken and force the Meteor out in less forgiving situations. And then I still have potentially Scalds to play. I can just be a little more aggressive with Hound in those matchups. So we'll see. I don't know. I mean, again, that's why I'm playing it, because I think Hound is really well positioned in a meta that isn't full of sweepers, but because the meta has shifted to a lot of wide board strategies right now, and sort of diverted away from big chunky units, we're seeing sweepers galore, right? We're seeing Mist Typhoons and Meteors and Nature's Wraths just kind of all over the place. So who knows? Real quick before we go too far, I want to give a shout out to S. Jansen for following us 9 hours ago. I think I know who that is. If Spencer's watching, thanks for the follow, man. That's super awesome.
It's Spencer, yep.
Yeah, I was pretty sure I knew who that was. Funny fact about Spencer is that he grew up my neighbor. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, and it's very funny because he was your neighbor when he was very young, and then
yeah,
he and I went to church together when I was very young. Totally years and years before I knew you.
Yeah.
And then when I was like a freshman in college, he like started to come to Hobby Town to play Magic, and that's when we became friends for real. So
yeah, he was like
I
my
had
brother's
met him
age.
previously in life, but
because I think you're about 5 years younger than I am, and he's my brother's age, and I think you guys are very similar in age.
Yeah, we're the same age.
Yeah, yep. So just kind of cool. It's always
Lincoln is a little town.
It is the biggest little city in the world sometimes. But yeah, okay. So let's, Neil, if you're ready, let's start talking about some of the bombs that got dropped today. Because I feel like
about my newest love.
Well, yeah. I mean, you love cards that draw you cards.
I've literally been talking about this guy ever since I saw him in the playtest stuff, like, weeks ago.
Yeah.
This card's insane. If you don't think this card is insane, I think you're crazy.
Yeah. No, I think this card is very good. I'm less convinced it's insane, but I think it's very good.
This is just the second best card in the game after Scald.
I'm not sure I'm on the same page with you on that, but okay.
No actions, 1 dice, 1/1 draw card. Like, oof. Jesus.
I think it's good. I don't know how.
Like, have fun ever playing your 1/6s again. Like,
why?
1 dice, block it, draw card. Oh. It's not interactable. You can never remove this blocker. The only way you can beat it is with Gigantic or Terrify.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, but I think that we've made that distinction plenty of times with Dreadwraith, that like that's what holds Dreadwraith back from being competitive is the fact that it can't bypass. So, I mean, if you're talking about this card as an impact on competitive meta, I'm not sure it's going to matter that much. Like,
I think it's absolutely insane. I think it's bonkers.
I think it's fine.
Just because it can't block Bear doesn't mean it can't block every other thing. Like, imagine if the board's open and you like play a massive growth or whatever and try and attack, and then you just get jumped by this guy. The value there is insane.
Sure, but I don't think you're going to play massive growth. I mean, in a real deck, you're not going to play massive growth on something that's not going to get through anyways, right? Like
even into an empty board, like,
oh yeah, like I would. So like if I was playing massive growth, I would look at different ways to give that unit bypass. Some way for it to get past and say it can't be blocked or can't be guarded. Especially against time, because you just know that there's so many different ways that time can interact.
I think this guy's insane.
Time's got so many cards that do this sort of similar kind of effect, right? Like, I do think he's very good. I think
I was happy playing against you last night, just like making an owl and blocking and jump blocking. Like,
yeah,
this dude does that a jillion times better.
I agree with that statement. He is better than Owl as being a defender, because the Owl has sort of this this other sort of tug to use the memory drain consistently. So, and to Taj's point, it is a super cheap card. And we know in Ashes, in particular, when you talk about having a fixed amount of mana to use, that cost-effective cards like Swift Messenger really open up your turn in many different ways. So, drawing an extra card with Swift Messenger being a single die means that you've probably still got dice to use on something that you're going to draw off of it.
And it doesn't use an action. Like that's
Sure.
I mean, it can use an action if you have the option to play it in that mode, which you will do sometimes, because we'll talk about that later when we're looking at the preview cards. But like, not being a reaction as well as just
I think it's. I mean, I think that it's obviously it's very good against anything that doesn't have bypass, and that's the key there, right? So, if something has bypass, then the card is less good.
I think this card is great for the same reason it's called is great, where you're never unhappy about drawing Swift Messenger. It's good in every situation. Like it's never going to be bad. It's always going to give you gas. It's always going to give you something to do, and it's always going to give you time. Like,
yeah, Taj, no problem. So it's very similar formatting to the Shadow Guards that are in my Shadowhounds list, and that's why I was familiar with that rule, because I needed to double check that also, because I was kind of wondering, like, could I Shadow Guard and then play a reaction on the same, like, turn around, like, play my Shadow Guard, and if somebody tried to slash with Cole, for example, could I protect the Shadow Guard with my own Particle Shield? And the answer to that is no. So if Cole players suspect Shadow Guards, they have to attack without taking side action, so that they can still slash a guard if you make the guard. In that case, I just make the guard as a defender. And again, it's a very similar kind of approach with Swift Messenger. There are times where I think you're going to play Swift Messenger and not defend and just take the 1/1 body on the board. And that, pairs up nicely with something like a Standard Bearer, that pairs up nicely with an Immortal Commander, for example. I mean, those are the kinds of things that you're going to want to be trying to do. Like, if you can excel at, like, play Swift Messengers and then play Time Hoppers and, like, accelerate into, like, an Immortal Commander buff on Swift Messenger and Time Hoppers, like, you're doing a lot of value. It starts to get back into those decks I was talking about, where you're sneaking out units that are non-respondable from your opponent's perspective. And, it's possible Messenger just wants to be in Noah, right? Like, it helps you get to second Wolf Book without having to spend time on making second Wolf Book. It helps you with, playing Light Swordsmans as your side action and having, 2 or 3 bodies that weren't on the battlefield at the start of the next turn. To Neil's point, it's great as just, like, chump the 3/3, Emperor Lion, or the, 3/4.
If it blocks, you're always blocking up. Like, you're never going to lose dice. If it attacks, you're probably, like, fine. Like, it has 1,000 modes. Like, and all of them are good.
But I don't think
and
I'd go
at every function of the game.
I still don't think I'd go as far as calling it the second best card behind Scald. I think it's very good, but I think Scald brings so much more utility that to the table than Messenger.
That's why Scald is the best card.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, I'm not even sure. I'm just saying, like, I think even in the terms of one cost allies, I think it's on the same sort of level as an Anchornaut, or because Anchornaut can effectively do the same thing, and if your opponent wants to spend dice removing Anchornaut, you're probably winning. So I think that I think it's good. I think it's going to be a great card, and I think it'll be played in a lot of time decks. I just don't know if it's the best card in
It's not the best card. It's the second best card.
I'm saying,
if I was writing that article I wrote last week, now this would have its own little blurb like Scald does.
Sure.
This card's absolutely insane.
I just don't think it's as impactful yet. I'm not sold on it as much as you are, but I appreciate your. It's
gonna teach your Shadowhound a thing or two.
Sure. I mean, I don't disagree that it makes any big unit potentially worse. Potentially. Again, because of a non-reactable defender.
Which, right, it has aggressive mode too. Like, you just play it on your opponent's turn and attack with it. Like,
It's
It's
also interesting because I think the way the Shadowhound would work is the Shadowhound comes into play first. You'd have to play Messenger before the focus ability on Shadowhound triggers because of the way that this works. It says after a unit comes into play. So the way the Shadowhound book resolves, you have to resolve the Hound into play first before you do the focus effects. So I don't think it makes Shadowhound cry at all.
so you don't have to complete your effect before I do
No,
mine.
I pause the effect for your reaction.
We need to get clarification on that
It's
because that
always the
doesn't
way it
make any
is.
sense.
The whole game is this way, man. You complete the whole
There has
effect.
never been an effect like this in the game, so we should ask.
There is an effect like this, the Shadow Guard. It triggers off
No,
of the
that's
opponent's
when you
action.
attack. That's very different.
I'm telling you, it's going to work exactly the same way.
It
I'll
may,
guarantee you.
but there's no precedent for it. We need to ask.
Okay.
Like,
I'm very
something that's the
comfortable.
same
In
as
my,
Shadow Guard is not.
I'm very comfortable with my assessment of this. Very comfortable with it, but that's cool. I'll let you roll with it. I think it's still a good card, and I think one dice to draw one card and make a 1/1 body is fine. But I don't think it's completely unrespondable because it happens when you play a unit. It's not like when I declare an attack, you get to Swift Messenger, right? And then I can't interact with it. Like I can still interact with it with a side action. So
I think this card's crazy.
I think it's fine. I just think it's fine. I'm not as sold on it, but I understand your excitement about it, and I look forward to watching you play it and seeing how it goes. I'm willing to have my mind changed, but I think it's a good card. I think it's the kind of card you want to be playing in time, but I'm not sure it's like meta warping. So, anyways, all right. So we went through that card in ad nauseum. We can talk more about it after we start seeing some games come in with it. I do think it's a bomb card. I do. I think it's a bomb card, but I don't know whether or not it's the end all be all. All right, so let's talk about Foresight, because this one's a little bit more of an anomaly to me, Neil, and so I want to get your thoughts on this. It's a main action single time class. It says during the draw a card step, you may draw one additional card. That's the so it gives you a hand of 6 instead of a hand of 5, which is something that when I noticed when I was playing Aerodel yesterday is kind of almost needed because you sort of, especially if you're accelerating, you sort of burn through your hand really fast, and you may still have dice left, but you don't really have anything left to do unless you have a bunch of ready spells on the board, which I had in my Aerodel list to sort of compensate for that, right? But if I didn't, and I was just playing a bunch of allies and stuff, like it's very possible that like you have like a bunch of dice left and no cards in hand and nothing to do with your dice. But it's got a main action. It says look at the top 2 cards of target player's draw pile. Place one of those cards on the bottom of the draw pile and place the other card on the top of that draw pile. Okay. I mean, so it's like a mini Raimia's Visions, right?
It's a lot better than Raimia because you don't have to pay dice
for it. Right. You have to pay dice for the book, though. So you do pay your first die to make it happen. After that, it's value. So, I mean, if you first 5 it... like
the second effect on the card like is very similar to Raimia. I think it's worse than Raimia because you don't have to pay a dice into it. The first effect on the card is like probably worth a dice.
See, I think you could play it with Raimia, personally. You could play it with Raimia because Visions itself doesn't cost anything to look at the top 3 cards and rearrange them. And then play Foresight to pick the 2 of the 3 best cards and get rid of them. Like that's a turn for Raimia.
Well, you end up putting like only 1 on the bottom and 2 back.
Sure. I mean, absolutely. But you're going to take... So the first thing you do is the Visions. You look at the top 3 cards. That allows you to rearrange them. You don't have to spend any dice to bottom one. But if there was like 2 really bad cards for you, you could force the bottom of 2 cards with 1 die, right? I mean, that's potentially possible.
Right. I think it's fine.
I think that's the kind of Stefanos in our tournament is playing a Raimia mill deck. And he's talked about this deck quite a bit and what it brings to the table in terms of just tempo on mill. And just the fact that it can establish, through Ancestral Army and things like that, a board presence that, forces your opponent to spend time dealing with the board and not dealing with the PB directly, which is something that like Leo Mill sometimes struggles with a little bit. That I think like Raimia can be a lot more aggressive in terms of milling away really good cards for you. And because you can pick what card's going to end up on the top for something like a Purge or whatever. This is just like another kind of mini version of Purge. So it gives you another main action.
Right. I don't know where this belongs. because I think as a card, I think it's fine.
Right.
Like, I don't think it's great. I think it's very middle of the road as non-summon book ready spells go. But
And the additional card is not meaningless, though. I mean, like, let's be honest about
right,
it.
I agree with that. But I don't think it's like great either, because drawing an extra card is fine. So that, like, let's compare this to all ready spells, not just regular ready spells. So your ready spells are all gas, right?
Mhm.
Like, and the gas from this ready spell comes from the additional draw.
Correct.
Which, if that card is a reasonable play for you, then this is like a book that mills you faster, because if it was a summon book, it would make you gas by making the token. In this mode, you don't get the gas until the turn after you play it.
Mm-hmm.
But from then on, if the longer the game goes on, the better Foresight becomes. But like, ultimately, you end up in this weird place where a lot of the good Phoenix Borns only have a 3 spell board.
Right.
And it's really tight. So are you going to play Foresight, which is a fine card with, it's like medium floor, low ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're never going to be sad about drawing the additional card. You're never going to be sad about activating the Foresight.
Right.
But you're not like excited about it either. Right. So like, are you going to use a ready spell slot for this? Because the only time you'd ever play this card is in your first 5, right? Like, having it in the pile is awful.
Right.
Because you don't get, like, drawing it and playing it, you get essentially nothing from it.
Right.
Until the following round.
Yeah, it's really a first 5 card. Put it down and forget it. And then I guess it could be a reasonable meditation fodder late in the game if you needed to, like, free up a spellboard slot for some reason.
Right, and not mill yourself. Because I assume that this, like, kills you faster if you're on low deck.
Well, I mean, it's sort of an odd thing, right? Because it's potentially possible, if you're not playing all of your cards from hand, that it doesn't actually mill you faster. Like, you end up in a situation where you're just hoarding more cards. I mean, obviously there is
because it increases the number it's not like abundance where you just like end up higher than you would refill to. This increases the amount you refill to. Mm-hmm. So if you have no cards in hand and 5 cards left, you take an exhaustion. That wouldn't happen.
Yeah, but I think you could do this
without the Foresight.
Like, you could do abundance with this card too. And it may, like, it's kind of funny that Cole is getting beat up on the card art here, because I think it may actually be really good in Cole. Like, giving...
Sure, Cole likes extra cards. Again, it comes down to, like, is this a better spellboard slot than, 50 other spellboard cards you could play?
It just depends on the deck,
I think it's better than, like, 20 of them.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's better. I think it's better in certain decks, and I think...
I also find it very strange that this is in the Jericho pile.
I do.
Like, I think this card is cool, but, like, it has...
Yeah, Yoro, I agree. It's just he's getting beat up on the art. To me, it should look like Jericho and Cole giving high fives to each other.
The thing about it is it kind of has like a non-bow with the Jericho ability.
Mm-hmm.
Because manipulating the top of your library before Jerichoing is bad.
Yep.
And manipulating the top of your library after Jerichoing is bad.
Well, I think it's where it's good is you can manipulate on one turn. You manipulate the top of your library to see if the card you're going to Jericho for is there before you spend the dice on Jericho. Because if it's there, then you don't have to use the Jericho power.
Right, but then you've just wasted the Foresight power because you're going to shuffle. Like, that's what I'm saying is, like,
why am I going to shuffle?
Mode.
No. Why am I going to shuffle?
Because you're going to use Jericho.
No, not if I got the card I want on top. You see what I'm saying? Like, you can look before...
Well, yeah, but you're really going to, like, play this card instead of activating Jericho? They cost the same dice.
I don't know. I mean, again, if it means that I can have a permanent on board that gets me 6 cards, maybe. I mean, that's it's unplayed, right? So I don't know.
I think it's strange that it's in the Jericho deck is what I'm saying, because both orders of doing it, Foresight first then Jericho, or Jericho first then Foresight, neither one makes sense.
Yes, Yora, we did talk about maybe before you jumped in that Foresight is a card that I think when you look at like Stefanos's Rymea deck, where he was using visions to set up to reorder the top cards and then using purge to purge the top two cards off, like Foresight actually allows you to get the third card from Rymea's vision on a future turn. So as long as your opponent doesn't have any sort of draw engine set up, you actually can control all three cards between Foresight and Purge with Rymea. So I do think that's a potential deck for this, where you actually get to discard three cards.
In your 3-color 7-dice deck, because you're using 3 dice to manipulate their library.
Why are you using 3 dice?
1 for Rymea, 1 to cast Foresight, and 1...
Wait, Rymea doesn't cost a single thing to look at the deck. It only costs a die to bottom a card.
Right. Okay. So you're assuming that you're not bottoming with Rymea. You're
Correct.
just looking at 3.
Just looking at 3 and reordering them. Then you can purge the top 2, and then you can Foresight to look at 2 more cards and pick from those 2 cards which is the worst one to discard.
Well,
I don't think it
in
costs
that
a
case
reorder.
you should just. In that case, like 95% of the time, just purging then Foresighting is the same thing.
Hold on.
Very rarely would doing Rymea first.
I mean, I'm willing to be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure Rymea can reorder without paying.
Yeah, she can reorder them, but if you're purging 2, then looking at 2, the Rymea essentially is meaningless because it's just looking at 3.
Sure. So Rymea says, look at the top 3 cards of target draw pile. Then, so you look at the top 3 cards. Then you may spend 1 to place 1 exhaustion token on this card to place one of those cards on the bottom of that draw pile. Then place the remaining looked at cards on the top of that draw pile in the order of your choice. So if you don't spend 1, you still have 3 cards remaining, and you put those on the bottom in your order of your choice. So it doesn't. I don't think it costs to reorder at all. I think you can reorder with Rymea all day long. Yeah. So it's just giving you access to look at 3 cards, and I think between Purge, and then. So if we go to Purge, not Phoenixborn. Okay. Ashes. All right, so if we look at Purge...
Purge flips 1, and then you can pay an extra to flip 2 if it's focused, is that right?
Right. Yeah, exactly, Yoro. It's Sensei's Divining Top, sure.
It's Sensei's Divining Top that requires 2 extra cards and 2 extra mana.
Sure. But I think, you can go ahead and Purge here, Purge 2, the single charm, so that's 1 color, charm and time. What's the third color we need?
Okay, you can play charm time.
Yeah, I mean
I was wrong about 3 colors.
Okay. So I mean
it's
and we already know that
3 or 4 dice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not 3 or 4. Why is it 3 or 4?
You still have to pay for the Foresight at some point. So it's like 3.5. 2.5?
It's 2 dice.
2.5 or 3?
Yeah, it's 2 dice for sure. In round 1, because you're probably not going to focus the Purge, but if you do go ahead and like resonance a Purge, I guess, I mean, that's possible. Then you're at 3 dice. Or 4 dice, you're right. Like, if you actually have focus 1 online round 1, Yeah,
it's probably closer to like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But,
so anyways, I think it's reasonably inexpensive. And when you look at like mill decks that are playing, like the Night Orchids and why can't I think of the other card right now? Chat, my brain is not working today.
Well,
I apologize. The
Foresight is not a mill card. It doesn't actually mill them.
Right. Well, sure. Sure it does, right?
No, it puts it on the bottom. It moves no closer to decking them than...
That's true, because it is the bottom card. So it may not be the right place for it. But I guess it takes away a potential like threat.
Right. And if you have the Jericho, like if you're playing Jericho, you're gonna Foresight your opponent because you don't want to screw up your Jericho activation.
Right. So if you use your own Jericho activation to put a card on the top, right, and then you Foresight as your main action, you get to draw the card you just put on top, and I agree that it potentially can give you gas. I did say with Cole, I think it's funny that this card has Cole getting beat up on the art. Hey, thanks, Gunshy Killer. Appreciate the follow, man. That's super awesome. I think it is a situation where Cole likes this card because of the additional card during the draw step.
I think this card is way better than Ironworker. which is like a similar effect
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't die to everything.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Ironworker has to be like your your last play of every round, and you have to just have out actioned your opponent, otherwise your Ironworker gets destroyed, and you don't get 2 cards.
Right? Like this is the kind of card that a deck wants, where it's not very dice efficient, but it needs a lot of main actions.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense. Like
It makes a ton of sense.
like it wants to go last, but it also wants to spend a bunch of dice.
Right.
So like having the free main action.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
Good.
I like cards like this. Like this is one of the reasons why I put Frostbites in a lot of my nature decks, is because Frostbite just allows me to spend 1 die to like delay the end of my turn. Right. Like if I'm not ready to put out something, you know, I think this is the kind of thing, and I agree, Gunshy, that you know, it didn't do what I was thinking. I was thinking I discarded a card, which was giving me like a 3rd discard. But what it does do is allow me to take away other threats with Rymea. You know, like I get a chance to look at all 3 cards, reorder those cards, and then if again, to point, if we're playing Purge, like purge 2 of them away, then run Foresight as another action to look at those 2 cards again and pick the worst of the 2 cards to keep on
It's
top.
good if you like. It's okay if you Rymea first.
Mhm.
Don't spend dice. You look at 3, then you activate Foresight. You get to take the best one and put it on the bottom, the best of 3.
Right.
So
Assuming
it's
that your
a
opponent's
little
not
bit
gonna
better
draw.
than just activating Foresight by itself, where you get the best of 2.
Right. Right.
Having the Purge negates the Rymea ability, because Rymea looks at 3 and Purge looks at 3.
Yep.
So you lose the if you're purging for 2, it really gets them because you're looking at 4 instead of 3.
Right.
If you're purging for 1, it's, I don't know, 5% better to have Rymea at first, but that means you're also having to play Rymea, so you better be like excited about that.
Right. And yeah, that's a great point.
But yes, it is really good in the Jericho against Jericho.
Yeah, it is a good card to respond to Jericho's own fetch. It's, and to Cam's point also, the cost up front to give you a free main action later if your deck is built with lots of side actions along the bonus draw. Yeah, I think
Right, that is the accurate description of this card.
Correct. I think one of the things you're always going to run into with accelerate decks is, do you have enough main actions? And when you saw, like, if you watched us stream last night with me playing the Airedale deck, like, that's why I just had a bunch of books. Like, that deck has no allies, right? And the reason why is because I knew there was just a chance that my hand was going to be filled up with accelerate actions. And so I just wanted to make sure that I had a book main action that I could take if I am not able to set up like the accelerate into time hoppers into big swings like plan. And fortunately, I never had to do that last night against Neil, but it gives me that sort of like time, quote unquote, pun intended again. I enjoy this, to set up plays, and you have to have enough main actions in decks, and that's one of the things that Noah always suffered from when I was trying to do the big like Noah Splash Allies swarm thing, was that I didn't have enough main actions. Like I just ran out of main actions all the time. So
that is a good point that you bring up. If there are quote accelerate decks that want accelerate, Foresight is the kind of card they want, not only because they like it fuels the main actions to give you time to set up your big side action turn.
Yep. And
it also just like gives you a much better chance of drawing the additional accelerates, because you draw an extra card and because it like sleight of hands you.
Yep.
For those of you that play Magic cards, the second effect on Foresight is sleight of hand from Magic.
Yep. So, all right, so let's move on.
If you hear me say that, that's why. For sleight of hand.
For sleight of hand. I see what you did there. I kind of like it, not going to lie. Let's move on to the card that I think is, and the 3 we got today, just kind of insane.
I know, very good.
I think that this is the kind of card that time needed, and not time needed, but just anything needed in order to shut down really, really poor swings where like you didn't want to defend with a unit, but at the same time, like you just didn't want your Phoenix Born to take 3 damage or whatever, right? So Outmatch is a reaction spell. It's got a single time power to play, which I think is more than favorable cost on this card. You may play the spell after an opponent declares attackers. Add 4 to the attack value of a target unit you control for the remainder of the turn. Holy crap, guys. Like, holy crap. Like,
It's funny that you can, like, block a bear with an anchor knot.
it blocks everything.
Because it turns off the bypass, too.
It turns off the Hydra. Like, it turns off...
Which... Does Hydra have Terrifying or Gigantic?
Terrifying.
Okay, so yeah, it'll have Terrifying 3, and then you can block it with this.
Right. The Night Killer. Cam, it's definitely the Night Killer. It's the killer of all units in this game, sans one. Archosaurus Mount. It's the only unit.
It doesn't kill your 1/6s either, but
okay, but like Archosaurus
honestly,
has
like a lot of the times it does, because you're playing 2-power guys. Like, you don't have to play this on a 0-power creature.
Correct. Like, you can just throw this on an Ancestor Spirit. You've spent 2 dice to take out a 3-dice unit.
And it's very good.
In my opinion, this card is single-handedly one of the best removals that we've seen. Because it stops everything of size from being able to attack you. Everything.
Well, the caveat to that being that it requires some work, right? Like,
sure,
it only kills attackers.
Sure.
It never kills other units.
Sure, but we have the opposite side of this with Flash Strike, right?
It only kills... imagine if you outmatched and then you got Flash Struck. Oh my god, you get annihilated.
Just get rocked, man. Like, just get it. Like, like you just outmatch on a Salamander Monk. Yeah, I mean, Gilder, exactly. There are so many targets for this card.
Well,
it is insane.
What I was saying is that Flash Strike counters outmatch.
Well, sure, because you get the quick strike, right? Like,
right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the quick strike.
If I block your bear or whatever with my anchor knot because I outmatched it, and you play Flash Strike, I should just concede. Like,
what's
just like 8 for 1 to me.
What's interesting is the timing on this. And I don't know how 2 reaction spells actually work from a timing perspective. This was something I was going to look up on stream tonight. I got to grab...
Are you asking about Flash Strike and Outmatch specifically?
Yes, because...
Outmatch happens when you declare attackers. Flash Strike happens after defenders are declared.
Okay.
So, like, the Outmatch will have already resolved.
Yes.
Then there's another step. So then you play your Flash Strike.
Right, so Flash Strike still gets it. Absolutely.
It gets it every time.
Yeah, every time.
Well, unless your guy with +3 attack doesn't have greater attack than the defender's life, but
like, you can just...
That would be very difficult to do.
You can just outmatch a Dreadwraith here.
Even Dreadwraith, like, gets killed by outmatch. Like,
yeah, possible. It's very possible.
Yeah, I don't think it's like the end all be all removal spell, because it only kills attackers, and because it requires you to have a unit in play that can block, which we were already talking about how, like, most of the big threats you try to get past blockers anyway.
Well, we got the answer, Cam, because of the timing on actual Flash Strike. So I'll pull up Flash Strike here in Tabletop Simulator in just a second, so we can show you.
So Outmatch will always happen first.
Mm-hmm. Because Outmatch says you may play the spell after an opponent declares attackers. So if we're the Outmatch player, my opponent declares attackers, we have to outmatch at that point. We pick our unit and we give it the Outmatch +4 attack. We then have to declare defenders, and when we declare defenders with our new Outmatch defender, Flash Strike triggers when opponent declares defenders. So now the opponent, if they have Flash Strike, can Flash Strike that unit and give it, +2 attack and quick strike. That's probably enough in many cases to finish off the unit before it would get to defend. So it's not the end all be all, but man, does this sort of turn on like Time Hopper, right? Like Time Hopper just becomes...
Time Hopper can't block.
Right, but the reason why I like Time Hopper is what I'm saying is that with Time Hopper, like, I can put a status token on units, and now I have, lots of quick strike options, right? Because you have to have the status token on a unit to make quick strike.
Oh, you mean Flash Strike?
Flash Strike.
Yeah. Flash Strike is good with Time Hopper.
Yeah. So
Outmatch is not.
No. I don't think Outmatch matters with Time Hopper at all, but it could. Like, you still get... Yeah, you can't block with it, but I mean, like...
You could technically target a Time Hopper with your Outmatch.
Sure.
But and you would not be able to block with it,
Right.
and it wouldn't do anything. But yeah, I think this card's great. I think it's really, really good.
Yeah, it's
It just means like if your opponent has a turtle up, you got to be careful.
I think that you're right, Yoro, 100%. Right now, one of the problems I see is that only time can outmatch the outmatch. I agree completely with that. I think that if your opponent is showing a single time power die and you're attacking into it, you should pretty much expect the outmatch to be there. And there's no way to stop it.
You can attack with like a different quick strike unit, but there aren't that many.
No, I think it brings a lot of value to
Like,
what it brings a lot of value to is like light swordsman.
you can't outmatch a light swordsman. You can outmatch a light swordsman if you have 3 toughness, but then you don't really need to play the outmatch anyway.
Right.
But
unless yeah.
But like Battle Seer, you can't outmatch.
Battle Seer is a good example of
I think that's the only one, right? It's just those 2.
No, isn't there a summon that has quick strike?
I don't think so. I think it's just Battle Seer and Light Swordsman.
I'm trying to remember if there's,
but I'm not sure.
And there might be an alteration that gives quick strike.
That's true. There is an alteration that gives something quick strike.
Is there?
I think. Oh, maybe not. Whatever. You can't outmatch a Battle Seer. That's
yeah. Definitely, the Battle Seer is an important notice there. Working as intended is what Euro says. I just like that. Yeah, Battle Seer's got quick strike. There's not a ton of quick strikes. Raven?
Oh, right. Seaside Raven.
Yes, thank you. You're right.
Good call, Cam.
Yeah, sorry, a Seaside Raven gets a little bit of value here.
Can't outmatch Raven.
Nope.
Probably can't outmatch Raven anyway because it killed your blocker, but
yeah, hopefully it kills the only blocker. You just
beat Raven because kind of okay bad. I don't know.
Raven is tough to keep alive in constructed. Just 2 health units are just they're a tough tricky animal. Yeah, that's it. Raven, Battle Seer. Ghostly Mount Charger. Thank you. Okay, see, I was like, I know there's more than 2 examples of this here.
Can't outmatch 4/2.
So I
summon
think
from the Nightmare book.
Yeah, I think you're right. Spectral Charger Mount is a 4/2 with quick strike. The Nightmare has got Terrifying, so you can't outmatch a Nightmare Mount. Man, does that make out Nightmare Mount really bad? Like, are you ever even going to try to make Nightmare Mount at that point? Are you actually going to go for
I think Nightmare Mount is about the same as any other, like, 3 dice, whatever.
But it's not even, it's not really 3 dice, because in order to get 2 Nightmare Mount, you've got to spend 3 on the books and 2 dice to summon the.
I mean, if you're asking if I'd ever do it, no, I did it like for fun once against you.
Right.
But like, I don't think that card's actually very good. But I think that in general, the 4/4 Terrifying one is like a fine guy. It's just like all the knights. Like I'm playing Sonics in my tournament deck. I'm very happy about them.
So the difference
still
there,
probably play them into the
right. Yoro saying Nightmare Cell is terrifying. I agree with that statement. The difference here, Yoro, is that when I declare attackers, before
the outmatch turns off Terrifying.
The outmatch actually turns off Terrifying.
It doesn't turn it off. It still has Terrifying. It just makes your blocker brave enough to get in there.
Right. The blocker gets enough of a bump in attack power to be able to defend the Nightmare Mount, or defend a Frostback Bear, or take your pick. Take your pick of any unit that's got Terrifying 1.
If your goal is to play a unblockable unit, then the gigantic ones are better now.
Yes.
By a small percentage. I don't think they are actually better, because I think that they're just worse than the cards that have Terrifying.
Sure.
But it has increased their value specifically against Outmatch.
Yeah, it gives Archosaurus a better place to live, I think. And it gives, is it Majestic Titan that has Gigantic on it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Majestic Titan, a place to live as well. Although I would argue Majestic Titan's not quite as good overall with just Gigantic One. I'll be curious to see if we see anything that helps buff Gigantic units, because if we want tall units to survive, Gigantic are your best opportunities. Um, yeah, it's super important that it kills Terrifying. I mean, it's like that's why I think this card is just an absolute bomb, and it's absolutely insane to the game, because now I can just play any O2 Conjuration. I can play Gilder, I can play an owl, and not use the owl. And normally, what would happen in those gameplay scenarios is if I don't use the owl, like my opponent attacks the owl, and the owl dies, and the unit that my opponent attacked with lives on the board, I still have to deal with that unit that's on the board. Now Outmatch says, no, we're going to trade units. I like using it with Conjurations because I don't go down a card. Yeah, I mean, bears are going to get hit just hard by Outmatch. And you're just going to have to either play around that. And so the one way you can play around that with bear is, like to Neil's point, you can massive growth, but now you're not dealing the damage to PB face, which means you might be losing, right? Because bear relies so much on like the Terrifying One to be able to go past opponents' boards. Yeah, Koenig, you're absolutely right. Quick Strike gets a soft buff with this, no doubt. And that's why we talked about, like, in a time on time, Flash Strike is actually a real threatening card when Outmatch exists on time matchups. And I think Flash Strike is really good no matter what. So if you're going to play like a Flash Strike style deck, like, guess what? Flash Strike beats Outmatch in many cases. Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about just like splashing a couple of time dice, which I think is going to happen a lot now, Outmatch and Flash Strike both are opportunities if you have places for those to work. Flash Strike takes a little more setup. Outmatch takes no setup. So Blink and
it takes a setup in that you have to have a guy you're willing to block with.
Right. That's true.
Like,
absolutely.
It's not free. It doesn't just kill target attacker.
Sure.
But it is very good. It's really, really good.
It's super solid.
It's pretty telegraphed a lot of the times, I think, because I would assume 50% of the time you're going to have to meditate into the turtle, and if you like play Anchornaut, meditate into turtle, and pass, like, is your opponent going to attack?
Right. No, it's without a doubt. Like, I think Outmatch is the real MVP of this whole set. That's what I think. And now I know, Neil, you'll disagree with me probably on the Swift Messenger, but I'm willing to be wrong on Swift Messenger.
Yeah, I think Swift Messenger is by far the best card. I think that Outmatch is probably the second best card in the pile, unless you count Blink. But like, it's hard to count Blink because it's the signature
card. Right? And so we don't have the new cards in here yet to play with tonight. But that's okay. They'll come soon, I'm sure.
Right. I'd be smashing Swift Messengers if they were in the...
Yeah, I thought about it in my Airedale list. Like, the Airedale list I was playing last night, like, it sort of works. I think what Swift Messenger does, Outmatch, amplify birds. I mean, sure, if you want to amplify your birds, go for it, man. I'm less, like, I don't necessarily like amplifying birds. I just think there's too many, like, removals out there. But amplify as a whole, it's a fine gotcha card when you get it. It's less good in many other cases, and I've played amplify a few times. Like, I've amplified Gilders, but at the same time I've also massive growth Gilders, right? Like, it happens. Like, there are moments in time when those cards are like, oh, that's a pretty cool and cheeky little thing to do, but like 9 times out of 10 that's never going to happen, right? Like, it's just not. But what is going to happen is, things like Nightshade Swallow, where like your opponent attacks into a Nightshade Swallow and you outmatch that Nightshade Swallow, kill their unit, your unit still dies and you get to exhaust another unit. Like, ouch. Like, ouch. That hurts. I mean, that really hurts. Like, those kinds of cards are just getting so good that it's going to turn into a weird thing because of Outmatch existing, that board states are going to matter so much more than they already do, and you're gonna not be able to attack into clean boards. Even if you have Terrifying, it's no longer a clean board. That's what we're getting at here with this.
You
And
still have to have a blocker to outmatch. Like you can attack into an empty board.
but an empty board, absolutely, but not even necessarily like not necessarily. Yeah, I mean, you still could. Like, it's potentially possible, but also if you're like,
Yeah, that's just never going to happen because you might as well concede if you have an empty board. But like,
I just think it's going to be really, really. I think it outmatches the kind of card that really hurts aggro a ton.
yeah, that's a good point.
I think it does
You can
raise
like
illusion's value.
any dice fiddlers, like you turn their turtles off and then attack them.
Yeah, you have to be thinking about magic siphons. You have to be thinking like I think it's going to change the way we build decks so that you can deal with outmatch, right? Like I may put start putting single magic siphons in all of my sympathy lists, and just simply so if I see time on the other side, I can expect an outmatch and just first five a magic siphon, because then I could side action the magic siphon, med down the turtle power. I kind of like that as well. Just gonna go out there. I'm a huge Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan, and then be able to attack freely and know that the outmatch isn't going to come into play. But
Cam, I mean, if some like by 2% or whatever in the matchups where you have an additional dice, and they're showing a turtle, and you have a very big attack to make, like, yeah, you should do it. But
sure.
I mean, that's a decision that's based on the game you're in, right? It's not like you're going to do it every time. You need to decide if like that's a dice you're willing to spend,
right?
Because
that's right, Heroes in a half shell.
I don't know. I'm excited to see those kind of games played.
Sure, they're super.
I mean, that's a similar thing to like the just like the turtle v turtle thing, where you're like trying to put or remove time counters.
Absolutely. I'm with you. Like I do think that illusion becomes more valuable in the meta with the inclusion of cards like outmatch, and I'm happy to see that because obviously illusion is kind of generally considered on the bottom of all of the dice, and I think that's an undervalued place for it. I do think that illusion is very good at turning off guilt links, or not guilt links, golden veils, and there is reason to do that from time to time. But obviously, like spending a die to roll 2 dice down does not feel anywhere near as good as other things. And Cam, to your point, it is all based on round 2 plus use of resources. So like as you get deeper into games, it becomes more valuable. Like I played a lot of my Ashteki matches, and you'll see like if you go back and watch some of those on YouTube, where I just use illusion power to turn off golden veils to get my fadeaways on, or to get a steady gaze on a unit, because I was able to effectively control dice. I did this with Vicky too, also in a test match when Vicky went live. I wanted to test Vicky's particularly Copycat, because I think that's a card that's very difficult for them to program, so I wanted to see if Copycat would work. And I just used Vicky's ability a lot to just like randomly try to knock down dice that were problematic, and then I would do the same with my own dice that were less good and try to roll them up. And it didn't always work, obviously. Like I don't think Vicky is consistent enough to be competitive, but what it does tell me is that like meddling with your opponent's dice can be very powerful if used in the right scenarios and circumstances. And I think outmatch just puts even more weight on that. Now, how the best way to do it, I don't know right now. I don't know. But so far, most of the decks I've been playing against, and probably most of you all been playing against if you've been playing in any of the tournaments, has basically very little dice meddling on the opponent's side. Like we really haven't gotten to that stage of the meta and control meta of Ashes. And so I think there's room for that. And I'm glad to see that there's going to be cards that maybe potentially give us a reason to do that now. So who knows, I mean, that's the beauty of it. This is going to be a wide open meta. I mean, I'm excited to see how our tournament results come out. Like we're in round 2 right now of 5 rounds of Swiss, and I'm excited to see how that comes out. Time X Illusion PB. Yeah, I mean exactly. I will be so curious to see what the Time Illusion Phoenixborn does. Um, yeah, Cam, I actually played it to copycat a transfer, and in that transfer was able to re-exhaust my opponent's one unit that would have killed me. Um, and yes, I mean obviously copycatting Molten Gold is just like literally hitting the best card possible with copycat. But I was surprised, like my opponent used transfer to transfer his exhaustion token over to his book so that he could reattack with a massive growth bear. And I turned around and copycatted the transfer and put the exhaustion right back onto the crossback bear, and it was able to survive and win at that point.
Is that the way it works?
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
copycat resolves after the card it copies?
Yes,
Why?
because it's a reaction. So it says after your opponent has played an action spell, you may play this card and copy it. So your
Weird
opponent.
that the first one has to fully resolve. So it never saves you from Molten Gold.
No, you still
Like-
get hit by Molten Gold, but yeah, exactly.
Right. So if we're both at 3 and you Molten Gold me, I'm gonna lose. Like,
Correct.
Not.
Yes.
I can't copycat you and get you.
Correct.
It's weird that it works that way.
Yeah, but the fact that, like, to Cam's point, if you survive the Molten Gold, like you're just gonna get hit with the Molten Gold, and then you just like copy it to do 3.
That can't be right. The copycat has to happen first, right? Because Golden Veil has to happen first. It's a reaction.
Mm.
Because if Golden Veil just happened after whatever you Golden Veiled, it would do nothing, right?
You may play the spell after an opponent resolves an action spell or activated Phoenix.
Okay, so since it says resolves, that's different.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I just had to get it out because I knew there was something in the wording on it specifically. I've played it exactly once, so I'm not like sitting here going, "Oh yeah, I definitely know 100% how this works." But you would prefer Killsteal's like 1.0 sympathy thing. It wasn't so well received. Yeah, I can imagine that those kinds of things aren't well received by a large percentage of the player base. Where you think,
I mean, I would prefer that because I think it makes more sense. But
sure.
Though I guess not. Sympathy pain requires the damage to have already happened.